Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fish Tank. I'm Bad as Fish 80 and today we're going to be talking about one of the new cards recently added to Minion Masters, the Bounce Berry Flingers. Before we go any further though, please can I just ask you to take a moment to subscribe and like this video if you're enjoying the content. Okay, let's move on to the Bounce Berry Flingers. Bit of artwork. Now let's find out more about them and then we'll look at some gameplay. So here is the artwork for the Bounce Berry Flingers, but let's find out exactly what they do. Okay, so this is a 4 mana Zenchi ranged minion. We can see here that you get 2 of them. They have 90 HP each, and they do 40 damage per attack. And if we look at the actual description of the card, you'll see it throws 2 Bounce Berries. So that 40 damage that it quotes is 2 lots of 20 damage. So each Bounce Berry does 20 damage, and then as we look at the description of the Bounce Berries, you'll see that they bounce to an additional target and do 50% damage. So we've got a bunch of keywords, including the Bounce Berries, as we just mentioned. So let's have a look at those. So we've got Myriad. So we can see here that the copies allowed stat on the card is 1, so you cannot wildcard this. But the Myriad is kind of like a wildcard mechanic. When you draw this card, so that's when it enters into your hand, you will get 2 additional copies of this card added to your deck randomly throughout it. So you get multiple copies of the card, which is great, but also there's a mechanic that benefits how you use those cards. So if we look here, it says gain giant growth if you have another copy of Bounce Berry Flingers in your hand. So we can see straight away that we want to draw the card, get the extra copies in our hand, in the deck, and then cycle and have at least 2 copies in the hand at any time. And then when we spawn them, we will get the bonus, and we'll see exactly how that works when we look at gameplay shortly. So we've got the Myriad that we've just described, the Bounce Berries here, the attacks bounce to the nearest nearby enemy for 50% damage, and the Giant Growth. Remember, Giant Growth was recently buffed in the latest patch, so you get 30% extra damage and 30% HP. So the normal HP is 90, the Giant Growth will give it 117 HP, the normal damage is 40, the Giant Growth will give it 52 damage. Now, I just want to speak just a little bit about the Bounce Berries and how they bounce to another target. We spent a little bit of time on the stream the other day investigating exactly how this works. We weren't sure if it was bugged or not. Turns out it's not. So basically what happens is, as we see, this unit will throw 2 Bounce Berries. So it will throw 2 Bounce Berries at a target. Now, if the first Bounce Berry hits it and doesn't kill it, that Bounce Berry will bounce off and hit something else. The second one will hit it and again bounce off. But the weird thing we noticed, weird or just unexpected, was that if the first Bounce Berry hits, say, a Scrat and kills it, it will bounce off and hit something else. But the second Bounce Berry will effectively do nothing because it was targeted at that first Scrat. So in certain cases, against very small HP units, these the DPS stats that you would expect are not exactly what you get. So the bigger DPS is going to be experienced on larger units. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. And if you've got any questions, then of course put it down in the comments. Okay, so we've got Myriad, Bounce Berries, and Giant Growth. So we know exactly how these cards should work, but the next thing is to look at them in action and see how they do. So we've got a little game. I just put together a quick Volko deck with them in. Now, they're really useful in Volko because, of course, Volko struggles against air. So this is 1 card, effectively 3 cards in 1, some anti-air, really to help Volko out. And let's check that out. Right, so we had just a quick game that I set up here. And let's have a look at them in action.
It's Minion Masters. It's on.
So we're looking to see when we get the first one drawn into our hands. Remember, it's when we draw it, so that's when it appears in our hand, whether it appears halfway through the first rotation or if it's drawn immediately at the start of the game. That's when it generates the Myriad copies. And remember, as we discussed before, we want to try to spawn them when we've got multiple in our hand to get that Giant Growth buff. So we don't really need to talk too much about what's going on in this particular game here. We've got the Veilstalk, which of course is very strong, very difficult to deal with. And as you see here, the monkeys were added deep into our deck, so we still haven't found them yet. We're still waiting to find them. And one of the things that it's worth mentioning is that the Myriad copies, of course, add additional length to your deck. There's more cards in your deck, so masters that are cycle-based will struggle more than if they are... Okay, so here we see the first use of the monkeys. Right. So we've spawned them. They do have the Growth Burst Shroom buff. You can see that. They've got the extra little bump on their HP, which is the additional that they've got from the buff. And again, if we look at the cards in the hand, we can see they've got little icons over them. There's two icons they have. The first icon, the little monkey icon, that means it's a Myriad copy. So that's not the real copy of the card. That's the Myriad copy. And the second one is showing that if we use it, it will be buffed with the Growth Burst Shroom. Now, going back to the first icon, the Myriad copy, that's important because if you've got the Myriad copy and a real copy in your hand, you want to use the real copy first because you want to get that cycling back through your deck as quickly as possible to get more and more of these monkeys through your rotation. So we can see both of them in our hand are the Myriad copy. We spawned the real copy. And because we've got multiple ones in our hand, they will get the buff. So we're still waiting to spawn them here. Not forcing them, just waiting to use them as naturally as we normally would. So as mentioned before, it's good anti-air for a master like Volko that does struggle against it. And you'll see in this, we do have actually quite a tough matchup here against Novak with some air units that we really do struggle a bit to deal with. Okay, so we'll just pause it again quickly there. So we spawned one of the sets of the Flingers. Now we have another one in our hand. Now this, we can tell it's a Myriad copy because it has the monkey icon. It's lost the other icon though because it's not going to get a buff because there's no other copy in the hand to be used. So we need to take that into account. We don't want to spawn it unless we have to. I decide here to use it, and you can see the non-buffed ones are a lot smaller and they don't have that bump on the HP bar to show that they are buffed. This is a difficult bit to deal with here for me. Those air units, the Razor Squadron, that's awkward to deal with. Setsu's coming in as well. And again, we've spawned the monkeys without the buff, but sometimes needs must. Taking some damage here. Monkeys in the corner getting shredded by the Chain Lightning. But we can feel from the flow of the game that we're able to do damage to him and he's able to do damage to us. But it's our turn to push on him and try and do some damage. And these Scrats, of course, are enraged, so you don't take those lightly. And we close out the game at this point. There we see it. Victory for Volko with the Bounce Berry Flingers. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an insight into the card, and now you've seen it in action, there's a few little tips there about how best to utilize it. But thanks so much for your time. Again, hopefully you enjoyed this content. Please hit the subscribe button and give it a like. And I'll be back again soon here in the fish tank with some more Minion Masters contents. Fish, taking out.